right, Noel, we're live. Um, Thanks for joining me.
Hey, pleasure, Matt. It's good to be here, man. Good to be here.
So we had a chance to meet now, or we talked a few times now. There's a lot of stuff I want to talk to you about, but I'll just summarize your story. So I typically do that in the beginning in like 2 or 3 sentences, and then we'll kind of go through that. So that's a bit of a hook, for people who listen just the first 10 seconds, they might hear that and they'll say, okay, that's interesting, or no, that's not interesting at all. But hopefully it's interesting. So you basically, you bought the business that you're running right now, you bought that. So I'd love to talk about that experience. And then you increased revenue by at least a factor of 4,000. So we'll talk about what that means. How's that for a hook, huh? um, and one thing that I think you're really good at is networking. You're a member of a bunch of different communities. We just talk about it now. You like to talk to people. You have an extremely friendly personality, I think. So I'd really like to just talk to you about how you meet all these people and the kind of, I think, entrepreneurial lifestyle that you live. Um, yeah, so a lot of stuff to talk about. Was that roughly a good intro?
That was pretty much right. You got it.
Awesome, cool. So for everyone who's listening, if this is the kind of stuff that you like to hear about, the Founders Lounge is a podcast where I talk to entrepreneurs from the UK, inspiring people. I try to understand who they are, what makes them successful, so that hopefully we can all learn something from them. So today we got Noel, and I'm sure we're going to learn some interesting stuff from him. Now let's get into it, right? So JobRack, you're the CEO of JobRack, which is you help companies hire remote employees in Eastern Europe and South Africa, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And so how did this story begin? You bought the business. Can you walk me through that a little bit? That's kind of a new I don't think I ever had a guest who bought a business, right? So what
Okay.
does that actually mean?
And I'm not sure you'll ever have another guest that bought a business at the revenue level that I did. I think it's pretty unique. So, I mean, it goes back a little bit before I bought the business. So, I was in the corporate world. I was in like senior IT roles, like head of operations, program managers, director of IT operations type stuff, leading, like, hiring, firing, large teams over like 10, 15 years. And one of the things that I did, I realized I'd had this really kind of like intense day of interviews. And I was driving home and I was like, they just weren't good interviews, but yet they were good people. And I'd realized that no one's taught how to interview.
Mhm.
And so off the back of that, I actually set up an interview coaching business where I was coaching candidates how to be better at interviews and
Mhm.
put themselves across better. So did that for a year, learned a whole ton of stuff around building a coaching business, marketing, sales, the coaching itself, but I couldn't scale it. I couldn't make it, support me. So I did a year on that, and I was just going back into the kind of corporate world, picking up some consulting, and JobRack came up for sale in a community that we're both in. And basically, the forum post and the blog post that they put out was that, the time has come. We're going to shut it down if we can't sell it.
Mhm.
And this was JobRack was a job board that had been born in 2015 out of a forum post, focused on helping people hire what was then really about Eastern European developers, and then it kind of grew out to other roles from there. And the two guys that had founded it had other bigger things going on, so it was a side hustle. The year before, they planned to shut it down, and everyone in the community that loved it and was using it was like, no, keep it going. So they just put it to $1 a job post, just to mothball it, right? So people could
Mhm.
keep using it. And so, yeah, it was doing $15 a month in revenue when I bought it.
Okay.
And so I think, I mean, it's kind of still a business. Well, it was still a business, but it's
Yeah.
not. Yeah, it does lead for some good like 4,000x kind of statements, which are entirely true. So yeah, I bought it, and for me, actually, it was perfect because it was in hiring, which was something I knew a lot about. I was looking in the remote hiring world, consulting, helping businesses, something in that space. And it was already niched down, which I really liked, right? It was
Mhm.
niched into remote hiring, and this was pre-pandemic, right? And it was niched into Eastern Europe, which I really liked. Again, an amazing part of the world to hire from. So it had those kind of like positive factors, and all of the stuff that I would procrastinate forever on, like the logo, the
Mhm.
website, the
Mhm.
design, the tech, like all of those kind of things had been done. And yeah, there was tons of room for improvement, but it all existed. So I could move like really, really quickly with it.
It sounds like it had a bit of a brand or a bit of a fan base as well, right? If people were like, "No, don't shut it down," so that's valuable as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. And in quite a small way, you know, it's a community of
Mm-hmm.
about 1,500 people or so. But
Mm-hmm.
if you've got, you know, you don't need millions and millions of customers on something like this, especially when you're initially small. So yeah, I was able to kind of relaunch it within the community. I
Mm-hmm.
made the purchase price back pretty quickly, albeit obviously I was just reinvesting it straight back in. And then yeah, that was that kind of journey over the next 2 years was me, you know, figuring out what to do with this job board, how to grow it, you know, while still working kind of, yeah, full time and then part time in the corporate world as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then, so what was your growth story there? So then that was the first time that you were running a business, right? So obviously it's a very different. I mean, I worked in a corporate world as well. Not very big companies, but certain like big-ish companies, tech. It's very different than running your own business, right? So how's that switch for you?
It is, yeah. And I'd had that year doing the interview coaching, which definitely helped. And I'd been spending a lot of time with
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurs and business owners. So that was definitely useful. But there's a certain kind of sense of like freedom and excitement that comes with having your own thing, right? And as much as every now and again I dream about having a co-founder and like someone to share it with, actually that freedom to not have to think too much about someone else and just, you know, get out there, start building a small team. So I hired my first person to support kind of the job board. It was a switch, and it was quite an interesting one because I didn't have that, like what for many people is really scary when they move out of, you know, a well-paying day job and they go all in on, you know, entrepreneurial life or into a business. I still had the comfort cushion of my pay, and this was kind of a, you know,
Mm-hmm.
evenings and weekends, and you know, once I was part time, a little bit of daytime. So I had a real cushion around it. I was able to transition quite gradually, and yeah, figure out what I am and I'm not good at. And that was
Mm-hmm.
actually the challenge with the job board, right? So job boards are amazing businesses, right? If you can scale them, it's wonderful. It's money while you sleep. The big question is if you can scale it. And so as much as it had a little bit of brand, it had some support. And I got it to about probably what it went from $15 a month to about $4,000 a month in the first kind of year and a half.
Okay.
Um, and that was good, right? So it was funding it. It was spending some money on kind of like, you know, what we were doing. But in order to really scale a job board, you need one of two things. You either need a lot of money or you need digital marketing skills. And I had neither,
Mm-hmm.
which was my real kind of challenge. And that was my realization. I was like killing myself trying to grow it to be a, you know, what at the time I wanted it to be a six-figure business, right? I wanted it to hit that, you know, $8,333 a month. And it was tough. And one of the reasons it's tough is because you're only charging like a couple of $100s, right? Doesn't leave you very much to then invest in marketing. And the clients and the people that we want as our customers are really expensive to target on like Facebook ads or things like that, right? Because they're entrepreneurs and business owners in Western affluent parts of the world. So that was it was a good 2 years, but I learned a lot about what I am and I'm not good at, or still learning to be better at, I should probably say.
When were you ready? So there's a lot of people probably who are listening to this, and I was in the same position when you have a job and then you start something on the side, and then you're thinking about when should I switch? And my recommendation typically is like when your business is making enough money that that you can at least cover your basic expenses, and you feel like it's fairly stable. It's not just going to crash and burn tomorrow. That's a good time usually to switch, but there are different personalities and there are different approaches, and some people decide to raise money, some people prefer to take risk, right? And they just go all in, and they save some money before and then they go full time into their business and they hope that it's going to work out. um I'm wondering how did you think about that?
Yeah, for me, it's all about your tolerance for risk and
Mm-hmm.
how likely you think it is to pay off and how quickly. So, you know, two guys that we know, Dan and Ian from the Tropical MBA, they talk about the 1,000-day rule, right? That typically it takes 1,000 days to replicate a six-figure salary, right? Like a low
Mm-hmm.
six-figure salary.
Mm-hmm.
And that was pretty true for me. I think I was like 1,112 days or something like that before the point when I, kind of, came out of, the day job. I think the big thing for me is it's what will happen if you go all in on the business, right? So for some people, if they have the skills and it's just the limitation is time, right? So if you know you've got a business that if you were 40 or 50, 60 hours a week on, that you could get it to give you your income very quickly, then that is, that's what you should do, right? And that's a lower risk. Whereas if actually you don't have the skills to do it and you need money to invest in it, then the cash cushion is all the more important. And you may well be plowing all of the revenue and maybe the profits that you're getting from the business right now back into the business to grow it. And that was kind of my case. Like time
Mm.
wouldn't have helped me. It needed money, or it needed me to pivot. And that's kind of what we ended up doing. So I think it's just thinking about saying, right, if I go all in right now, how tolerant to stress am I? Because you don't want to be lying awake at night, right? That's no fun for anyone. You got to have enough of a runway, and then just a plan. And the key thing is, if you go into it and you don't manage to scale it as quick as you want, then there's always something you can do to make money, right? Maybe go back into the previous
Yeah.
world.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's very much it's like Goldilocks, right? You don't want to do it too early. You don't want to do it too late. You kind of want it to be kind of just right. Very, very tricky, right? But nothing's irreversible. I think that's my view on it.
Okay, quick break because I need to tell you something. My friend PJ reached out recently because he's hiring a COO, and that's something that you might be interested in. So PJ is the founder of Judge Me. Judge Me is one of the most successful or the highest rated Shopify apps of all times. They're based in London. They currently have 65 employees. They're growing fast. It's a profitable company. There's a lot you can learn in the COO role. They're looking to grow the company from 7 to 50 million over the next 6 years. And that's something that you can help them achieve. It's an awesome company, great culture, great team. You'll work closely with PJ. You'll learn a lot, and you'll help scale this company. So if that's something you might be interested in, I'll put the link in the show notes. And if the job description is still available, that means that the role is still open. So I encourage you to check it out. And if you're interested, apply. Now let's go back to the episode. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, nothing's irreversible, right? And I think I think generally the younger you are, the easier it is to do, because the younger you are, the less kind of financial needs you typically have. So, or you can just go back to your parents' place or whatever. It's kind of easier a little bit to just wing it. Later, you got certain needs and certain expectations for your lifestyle and so on. But yeah, I think it's good to have also just that confidence that if things don't work out, I have a backup plan, right? I'm going to do something. Like I'll get back on track somehow. I'll get a job, or I can freelance, and I have this skill that I can do, or that's certainly always been quite helpful for me, having that confidence. Like, if it doesn't work out, I can always go back to a job, right? And it's going to be
and I
okay.
think having the humility as well, right? I've done some like pretty rubbish jobs in my my youth, and every now and again I look at these guys that are like delivering Amazon parcels, and as much as it must be horrendous fighting with tracking and traffic and parking and stuff like that, every now and again I'm like, that'd be quite cool. Just listen to some music in the van, running around,
Chill.
getting my steps up. So I wouldn't actually want to do that these days, but I've got that, I guess, that humility. I'll take on any job, right? So if I needed to, that's what I would have done to bring in the money.
Mm-hmm. Cool, good. So so that was 2018 when you bought the platform. So 6 years. Are you public about your revenue numbers now?
Yeah, what will we be? We'll be probably or a little way over the 7-figure mark this year. That's kind of where
Mm-hmm.
we're pumping for right
Nice.
now.
Okay, congratulations. The seven
Thanks,
figures
buddy.
mark that we're all chasing, right?
Yeah, you're right. That's the one.
One of those entrepreneurial milestones. Um, there's a company that I've been following quite a lot that's doing something similar, right? Shephard. We all know about.
Mhm.
Well, a lot of us know about Shephard. It's a similar business, right?
Yep,
What do you
similar,
guys do?
focused on the Philippines. I think they're maybe niching down a little bit into some very specific roles, but the principle is helping business owners in the US predominantly in their case hire lower cost people from other regions of the world. So their focus is Philippines. Our focus is on kind of South Africa and Eastern Europe. But the principle is hiring is horrendous in the US right now. Right, it's for so many different reasons. And there are amazing people available in places where the rent or the mortgages and house prices are considerably lower than US or London, and so it's helping people get the benefit of that and build their businesses.
Mm. So Shepherd managed to grow really, really quickly. So I know about the founder like since many years ago, since before he started Shepherd. We exchanged a few DMs. I always thought he's a pretty good founder and doing a lot of cool stuff. And then Shepherd, I think, is now his biggest business, right? And they just grew to like 100. They probably have over 150 employees. But I was thinking about this yesterday, and I'm like, Europe doesn't really have a Shepherd.
Mm.
right? There's
Yeah.
no, they managed to build this brand. There's just now everyone, or at least in our, in our tech startup kind of bubble, we all know about Shepherd, right? Because I think they were very clever about their branding and their growth. But in Europe, I think we don't have that, do we?
We don't. And I think if I'd had digital marketing skills a few years ago, that might be different. I am now talking to people. And in fact, I've had a couple of conversations in the last few days about how do I, you said to me last week, right, this was perfect. When we first met, you're like, no, you're really visible in communities, but how have I not heard about you outside of that? And it's because I've not done anything around kind of like personal branding or about marketing. And that extends to me and to the business. I meet people. It's very much referral. It's very much word of mouth. And I think there are great people available all over the world. I have lots of
Mm,
clients that come to us having hired in the Philippines that want something a little bit different. That's what they get kind of from Eastern Europe and South Africa. So I think there's a ton of opportunity. But you're right, there are lots of niche players kind of in individual countries. South Africa's got quite a good few companies focused there, but there isn't anything on the Europe side. So not yet. Watch this space.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. It feels like they kind of set some sort of blueprint for how to do this, and I think Europe has an opportunity, or the UK at least, right? An opportunity to build their own Shepherd, and maybe JobRack is going to be that. Well, we're going to be watching the story. Your whole team is remote as well, right? I'm guessing.
Yeah, whole team is remote. So started very small with a job board. It doesn't need a big team. And then what kind of happened was I was about a year and a half in, striving for this like kind of six-figure run rate. I wanted to hit this like $8,000 a month, and it was just really tough. We weren't getting past the $4,000-5,000 a month mark. And I had a few clients that were approaching me saying, "Hey, look, these people we're hiring, they're amazing, but like hiring's hard work. Like, can you do it for us?" And I was like, "No, no, 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 no. I'll tell you how to do it. I'll give you that for free." And they're like, "Oh no, we want to pay you for this." I'm like, "No, no, no, no. This is free." And in my head, I was so stuck that I wanted to get the job board business to six figures.
Mm-hmm,
Like I
mm-hmm.
just kept parking this, and I was actually having some coaching. Well, must have been like 2019 or 2019, 2020. And the coach said to me, he was like, "Yeah, but no, the thing you want is to get to six figures. You'll get to six figures way faster by charging more money for a different service. That it's the six figures that's important to you, not the six figures from the job board." And so it took a few months for that to sink in. And then, yeah, we launched the hiring service. So actually helping people hire, kind of classic recruitment service, but done in quite a different way because, recruiters get likened to, estate agents and traffic wardens with the amount of love they typically get from business owners. So I wanted to do it in a very different way. And I was very, very resistant to becoming a recruitment company. But that's what we did. And we busted through six figures very, very quickly. And then and on from there. So it was that switching into effectively an agency model, really helping people to hire. So now we have the job board, which is great for many people and many roles. But the vast majority of what I'm doing and the team that's all across Eastern Europe and South Africa is all about helping our clients find the best people, filter them, screen them, test them, and basically doing all the hard work of hiring.
Mm. Do you think so? I think, okay, so 10, 15 years ago, the 4 Hour Work Week book was published, and everyone started suddenly hiring remotely, and people started hiring. I think especially in the Philippines, that's probably when the
Mm.
Philippines took off. And then now everyone's hiring in the Philippines. Eastern Europe, I guess, is fairly popular, and Africa seems to be up and coming. Do you think that's the new hub?
It definitely, I think what's happening is there's more and more of these like remote hiring sweet spots. And some of them are kind of well known for very, very specific things. Others are kind of just emerging. So I think South Africa's been around for a while. Certainly companies in Europe have outsourced and kind of built tech hubs in South Africa for years. So back in my corporate days, we had about 80 software engineers down in Cape Town. For one of the big corporates. And so, I've been very familiar with it for a while. I think there's lots of other really, really great regions and countries in Africa that are kind of coming up. And
Mm,
it's almost like, I'm not sure there is a marketing campaign anywhere, the kind of work board of South Africa kind of promoting South Africa as kind of like freelancers and remote workers. But there are countries, Philippines is very widely known. Eastern Europe, very widely known.
yeah.
South America and Latin America becoming very popular, and then more so in Africa as well. And for us, I don't want to be a fully global remote work kind of business, right? I'm looking at it just going, no, I want us to be niche down and I want us to be known
Yeah.
for certain things. But it does get interesting, right? We had a candidate asked us recently, they're like, hey, I live in, I can't remember, they were somewhere in another country in Africa. And they're like, but you only accept applications from South Africa. Why is that? That gets a little bit contentious. It's like, well, that's our niche. That's what we do. But we're always looking and saying, hey, should we expand and cover all of Africa? Should we cover, Latin America, for instance? And so far, at least, I'm trying to kind of say no and just be super focused and be like, yep, these regions have already done the marketing for us, right? The world knows South Africa is great for remote hiring, right? The world doesn't know that, XYZ country is that. And so it's kind of choosing which problems I want to solve.
So I want to ask you about something that I think you're probably also quite good at, which is building a culture in a remote first company, right? That's something that a lot of us think about. The world has gone through this transition now, well, sort of, right, since COVID, where a lot of some companies switched to remote. A lot of new founders, they build a remote first business. And it's a whole different beast, right? Because you're not there in the office with the people, and it's maybe more challenging to build a performance, like a high performing culture, a high performing team. It's definitely different from from the traditional model. And your team is obviously remote, but also you help your clients hire remote teams. So what's your advice? How do you build a strong team with high performing culture in a remote first company?
Yeah, I love this stuff and I talk about it a lot. I think so. For me, there's a bunch of little things that we do that go towards building the kind of culture that we want, that's important to us. But the most important one, if you want to build a team, is hire team members, right? And that might sound a bit weird, but not everyone out there that wants to, I don't know, let's say you're looking for an SEO specialist or a kind of an operations manager, probably less so for an operations manager, but for a lot of the classic remote roles, not everyone wants to be a team, right? If you go and look to hire on Upwork, for instance, right, they probably want to be a freelancer, right? They probably, it's a bit like the early days of Tinder, right? There maybe weren't so many people on there looking for long-term relationships, right? That's maybe different now. They certainly advertise that, you can get married and etc. And I've got friends that have married people from Tinder. But Upwork, as an example, is a freelancer platform. The whole point is people getting gigs, getting projects. So when you're going out to hire someone, the number one thing is find someone that wants to be part of a team. So, if you're using a job post, bring your team to life in that job post, right? A job post should be a sales page. So we put pictures, we put videos, we make it really clear that they're joining a team, and that's really important to us. And a good friend of mine a little while ago, he said how he thinks about it in his business is that, they're not a family, right? Lots of people say, hey, we're a family. No, we're not. We're a high performing team. And we show up for each other. And I was talking about this with my team just literally last week, and we were using like Formula One as an example. And you look at like the pit crew when they're doing a pit stop, and there's some great videos on YouTube about the evolution of Formula One pit change or pit stop times over the last 30 years, from 1980, or 40 years in fact, 1980 through to today. And it's amazing, right? It was I think it was about 12 seconds, and we're now at 1.8 seconds. They're doing the same things, but they've just had this relentless drive for improvement, and they act as a team. And that's one of the examples that I'm using with my team, and going, hey, look, we've all got to show up for each other. It's not about just doing your thing really well. It's about us supporting each other. It's about us, helping to improve and kind of, helping each other out. And so there's the setting the expectation side of things, but then there's a whole bunch of little things that we do that build our culture. So everyone gets a birthday card and a work anniversary card, right? Which we use this little online portal to do it. It's like an e-card site it looks like it's from 2001. And everyone puts a little message and a GIF or a meme in there, and everyone loves it. And it's really, really good fun. I send lots of random little Loom videos when I'm out and about in London. I'll just update the team on what I'm working on and what I'm up to. Because with most founders and most teams, the team have got no idea what you do day to day, right? Even if you're on a daily stand-up, even if you mention what you're working on, they don't really know. And so I try and keep them really close to what's going on, both the good stuff and the harder stuff. And so there's lots of little things.
You send Loom videos?
Yeah, just a little Loom video, hyper casual. And I love a hyper casual Loom video.
Thing, yeah.
I'll just be walking around, shoot them a little Loom, hey team, just want to let you know what I'm going on with today. And I'll probably do them. I'm going to be walking through London in a little while after we record this. And I'll do one and I'll talk about what I've been chatting about this morning and what I'm up to for the rest of the day. And there's a thing about this connection like between a team. And I think bringing people together is like really, really important. So there's lots of different things. Values are really important, especially around that kind of high performance kind of culture. But setting the expectation up front and interviewing against those kind of things is really key for me.
How do you keep the values top of mind, I guess? So I know that there are some companies that talk about their values every week or every day, or some put them on the wall in their office. If you don't have an office, I mean, maybe you can set it as a wallpaper on your laptop or something. I'm curious what you do.
Yeah, we're working on this at the moment. And the best tip I had from a friend of mine was in every team meeting, choose a value and ask one of the team to talk about what they understand that value to mean and how have they embodied that value since the last meeting. And I
Mm-hmm.
really, really like that because it helps to make sure that everyone understands what the value is supposed to mean. It also means that you see the different versions of the value, and it's okay that people have their own kind of interpretation. And then it brings it to life, right? So we have one which is about wowing our customers and clients, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
always good fun for people to be like, oh, well, I did this thing. And it doesn't need to be massive in order to wow someone. But it lets them share. We talk a lot about clarity, right? How have they made sure that they have clarity, or a client or a candidate's got clarity? So that including them in the team meeting that's one of the best ways I've seen and used myself. We're always looking at it. The thing that I hate is WeWork's a good example of this. They have values on their TV screens all around the office, right? And I read them and I'm like, I don't think they're the right values, right? And I'm sure someone in
Mm-hmm.
WeWork might disagree with me, but I do not believe that the community team or the people on the reception desk in WeWork really resonate with those values, right? I just don't think that's the case. And so I'm really anti just having them on the wall because, they've got to mean something and we've got to live and breathe them every day. So yeah, bringing them to life in team meetings is the best one for me.
And then also, I think larger companies tend to lose that. It's very hard in a large company. It's very hard for the founder to really embody, not to embody, but to show those values as much. And people hire other people, and they don't necessarily meet those values, meet that value
Mm.
criteria. I know that when I was hiring, I was not often enough careful about the values, right? I would always check for the skills. That's like the obvious
Mm.
thing to do, and I would often not validate the values. And it's difficult, right? I mean, you can try. And I had those conversations often, and like one of the questions that's been recommended to me is just ask in the interview. And we should talk about interviewing as well, because obviously that's your thing. So I'm curious what you got to say there. But for the values, I think that was that Alex who gave me that advice. He said one of the first interviews should be the value interview, or like among other things, you should ask about the values as well. And you should go one by one through your values and just say, where in your past work did you show this value, right? And then you see what's their answer, and then you see if they're, well, first of all, if they've done it, and second of all, maybe also how they understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, one of the corporates that I worked at, attention to detail was one of our core values within the technology team. And so every time we interviewed, we would ask them, when has your attention to detail saved the day? And
Mm-hmm,
so,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
there's one thing to ask about the values and when they've embodied it, but I enjoyed, and I'd still enjoy having really good kind of wording around this stuff, because I want them to think about when have they saved the day? And they might not have done, right? But it's a way of thinking about it and bring it to life. One of ours is focused speed, right? So I want us to work quickly, but
I like
not
that.
like going off in 12 different directions. I want us focused. And so we'll ask people, when have you worked with focused speed? And you're right. There's two things that I'm looking at there. Is one, I'm looking for the example, but I want to see what do they understand by that term? Do they ask me for clarification about what it means? And so much through all of the hiring process, if we ask a question or if we ask someone to do something, we're looking for what they say, but far more often we're looking for like the little micro signals that go along with it. So when we're testing a candidate, yes, we want to see how they do in the test, but I want to see how do they write the email submitting the test to me? Do they
Mm-hmm.
remember to share the Google Doc when we have told them to do it?
Yeah.
Um,
Like, what
we
do they
ask
actually do,
candidates.
right?
Exactly, right. And it's all
Mm,
of these things that are around it that give you these kind of, I refer to it as micro signals of like trust that they are going to
mm-hmm,
be the right person for you. We ask for almost all roles, probably not really kind of tech roles or developers, but for all other roles, we ask people to record a quick video. We give them the tech platform to do it. It's very, very simple. And I'm looking for the first 6 seconds. I want to see what their energy's like, right? Because for
mm-hmm.
me and the roles that I'm hiring for my team, everyone is customer facing and client facing. I want them awake. I want them to have energy. And if they don't, they're probably not right for us, but they very well might be right for other roles. So there's all these kinds of things that you can do. And some people, especially in the US, they can get quite anti about us, asking for videos because does it introduce bias and things like that? And I'm like, no, it doesn't. I don't care what someone looks like. I don't care any about that. I do care whether they're awake and they've got energy and whether they're, seem to care about this application.
You said focused and yeah, focused speed,
Speed.
focused
Yeah.
speed. So that's really interesting. I love that because for us, it's also speed is one of our values. We talk about that a lot, right? It's move fast, move fast. Um, it's very hard to be focused these days. It's very hard.
Mm.
You and I talked about that a little bit. So, what is focused speed?
So focused speed is that you are, so as an example, like my team have a variety of different tasks, right? So the recruiters, they might spend some of their day on call screening candidates. They might spend some of their day reviewing like requirements from clients and figuring out what our sourcing strategy is going to be. They might spend some time on team meetings. And then one of their most important tasks that they do is reviewing applications. So we get a lot of applications, like hundreds and hundreds of applications, and our job is to distill them down to like the 5 of the very best for each role for our client. So that is a really, really important job that we need to do quickly, but not too quickly. So the way to do that is to focus on it. So all notifications should be off, right? And so I tell all my team, I was like, I never want Slack to make a noise because it's not that urgent. If I need you urgently, I will phone you. But I don't think that's ever
Yeah.
happened in the history of the company. So focused speed for me is about putting the right things in place so that you can move quickly, but on like I'd much rather they moved one thing forward, then moved the next thing forward, rather than what people call multitasking, but it's not multitasking, it's task
Yeah.
switching,
Yeah.
right? And I refer to myself as a task switching monster because I'm always like, I know all the keyboard shortcuts, I can touch type really fast, it's great, but I just bounce around. And so I'm doing a lot right now to, I don't want to say hack, but effectively hack my way into focusing. And it
Mm-hmm.
is startling just the energy that it's taking to get
Yeah.
me into any kind of flow state. And the nature of my work means I work on lots of different things, do lots of different things during the day. It's not like I have 8-hour blocks to, produce things. That's not the nature of my role. But so focus speed for us is saying, right, what's the next task I need to do? Let's focus on it. Let's do it really well, but, work with speed, then move on to the next thing rather than feeling like we're working quickly and basically being busy. I think, and it's that danger is,
Yeah.
I'm working really quickly,
Yeah.
but I've got Slack notifications, got email notifications, I've got a
Yeah.
client call that I need to prepare for, and actually you get so much less done because it's. I think when you get interrupted, the stat is something like it takes you 20 minutes to get back into
Yeah. Yeah.
concentrating on what you're doing. It's just crazy.
So there's a few really interesting things that you said. That one is, I think, just setting expectations with the team, right? I don't need you to reply immediately. Like if something's urgent, well, I'm gonna call you. Like you don't need to reply to my emails or messages or whatever instantly. And the other thing is also just kind of coaching your team how to set up their own environment for that, like disable notifications, right? Because it's the algorithms work against us, right? And that's what you and I talked about a few days ago. Obviously, technology is built to be engaging, and it's built to um, get you sucked in, right? And they're like really really smart people at Facebook and like all the other tech companies working on how to get more engagement out of all of us, right? So I think it's very hard to outsmart them. So it's almost like you have to build your own systems to not consume too much of stuff that's not actually important or impactful, or that's
Mm.
that's taking your focus away, right? And I do actually think that that's going to be, or already is, a superpower if you manage to build
Mm.
that focus, both focus muscle, but even more the system, the environment where you can actually focus, right?
Yeah. And I think that the 10x or probably the 100x of it is if you teach your team, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
Mattis, like you and me, right? If we
yeah,
think about the people we hang out with, right? The people listening to this podcast, right? They're entrepreneurs, they're business owners. They're listening to podcasts like this where we talk about these things. Our teams probably don't, right?
yeah.
They're not in these conversations. They're probably not reading productivity books for fun, right? I love Dan Martell, Buy Back Your Time, David Allen, Getting Things Done, all of this kind of stuff. These are the kinds of books that we talk about, right? And so we're picking up the tips. We're often not doing them all, but that's another story. So the thing for me, we have a ways of working document at JobRack that goes down into it's only a few pages long, but there's some real fine points. Things like when working with Google Docs, do not make another version or a copy of the document.
Mm-hmm.
Comment in the document.
Mm-hmm.
Use
Yeah,
suggesting mode. And one of the things that we're getting clearer and clearer is when new people join us, not everyone has used a project management system before. Not everyone and most people don't know how to use them well. And so in fact, I've got a session this morning teaching two of my team some of my approaches to using our project management system. How can you make it work for you instead of the other way around? And we did a time management session with the team about 2 months ago. It was huge. We're getting everyone to share their kind of techniques, their challenges. And so I think for a founder or a CEO of a business, the biggest leverage that we can get is teaching our teams these things because
yeah,
they don't know, right?
yeah,
And if assuming especially if they're a little bit younger, they've only known, this, a lot of them have never worked on in a way that they really, really focus for a long period of time. And so that's what I'm leaning into a lot is trying to help them. It's a struggle to help myself. I'm getting gently better, but actually if I can help 10 people to be better with their time, then that's actually got a much bigger return than actually me doing it myself.
yeah. No, 100%. It's so interesting. So we do the same, and I've learned this from my business partner. I think I was much more. We're both extremely structured and extremely organized, and efficient, super focused on efficiency, right? And we're always thinking how can we do things faster and more efficient? And then obviously not everyone's like that. And I always felt, when somebody new joined the team, I was like, well, yeah, okay, they're doing things their own way, and that's okay. My business partner was always like, no, you need to use this color and you need to use this font size and the documents need to have this kind of name. And I was like, oh my god, there's so many people are gonna forget or they're gonna be annoyed. But I think he was so right, because it's those details that they just set the culture for how we
Mm.
expect things to be done. And we have about 15 or so people, so I'm not sure how long you can keep doing that. When you have 100 or so employees, I think it becomes difficult to set those kind of standards, those kind of details, because inevitably things at some point probably become a bit more chaotic. But I think it makes a huge difference in the beginning, and I actually really appreciate it. I've learned that from him. That now I'm like, no, use the right colors. You got to use the right,
Yeah.
you know. The
Yeah. I see. I'm not. So my view on that is I don't think it would become more chaotic. If anything, I think it's going to become less as you go on. And can you continue to maintain those standards? Yes. And I think I often think about, if you were to ask, Elon Musk, or if you were to ask Jeff Bezos about this, right? I'm pretty sure both of them would say, yes, you absolutely can set the standards, keep
yeah,
those same standards. And I think in two ways for me. One is by staying involved in the hiring process for way longer than you might like to. Right. And this is
yeah,
a conversation in another community that we're in at the moment.
yeah.
People are saying, hey,
I saw that.
at
Yeah,
what team size did you stop doing the interviews yourself? And I think it was Jeff Bezos that talked about this, that they were well in the hundreds of people and he was still doing the final interview, right? So for all us founders that were like, oh, I've got 15, 20 people, I've got an ops manager, I'm going to let them interview. Obviously I'm only 10 people, but I interview every single person, right? And that will be the case for a long time, I think, because I think it's so crucial, right? And it's not to second guess my managers, but it's, I'm in my role for a reason, right? And I think the other way of maintaining those standards is by really making sure that your managers and your leadership team kind of embody those values, almost just as much as you, right? Yes,
yeah,
I think it's fair to say there's going to be a natural erosion as you have more people,
yeah.
but I think in your leadership team, they've got to be, what's it, cliche, it's like singing from the same hymn sheet, right? They've got to really believe in it because they're the ones that are going to be influencing their team members more so than we will.
Yeah, Good point. If you're giving me so many ideas, your this conversation is giving me so many ideas for the things that we need to do. It's like it's one of those episodes that I'm gonna have to re-listen and just make notes and take action, which I enjoy. I hope everyone else is getting so much out of this as well. um, Communities, networking. I feel like you're extremely good at this. As you said before, so it's really interesting because I guess now, so I've been in the UK for 6 years now, and following the kind of business ecosystem quite a bit, and I never came across you until a few months ago, when I realized that you're all over a few of the private communities, and I actually think you're probably in more of them than I even know of. Um, and which I find fascinating and interesting, and I would love to, I'd love you to talk about it. But maybe just for a start, are you natural? Is that very natural to you? Are you a natural kind of people's person, networker, or what do you think?
So people person, yes, definitely. Networker, no. I find it quite cringy, right? And I think it's
Yeah,
getting, and there's a lot of
yeah, yeah,
connotations, like particularly with that word.
yeah.
Um, I think
Relationship
historically,
builder, maybe.
yeah,
I think
I
that's a
think
better
relation. Like
word. Yeah.
what I realized. So there's a bit of a funny story around this. So last year I did a desert island survival trip. It was just about this time last year. So I spent the last 8 days of my 30s on a desert island in the Philippines with I think 9 other people surviving. Right,
Oh wow.
completely off grid. Right, no phone for like 8 days. And it's a friend of mine runs the business, and he did this presentation a couple of years before, and I saw this, and I was like, "Oh, that looks cool, but it's really expensive." And it turned out that it wasn't. And I didn't. And some other of my friends saw it, and they were like, "Oh, that looks amazing." And I was just like, "Yeah, it looks cool, but I think that would be really uncomfortable, but probably really good for me." And it was on the basis it would be good for me that I signed up for it. So anyway, so there I am. I'm on this desert island, and we're 2 days in, and I'm chatting to one of the guys that I'd not chatted to much before, and he says to me, he says, "So, what do you like doing in your spare time? Right? What are your hobbies?" And I kind of thought about it. I was like, "Oh, well, live in London now. I like going to kind of cool bars with friends." And as I said it, I was like, "Oh man, that sounds dull." Right. And, what would Brewdog say? Dull AF. Right. And I was kind of like, and then I thought about it, and I thought about it a lot actually, and I realized that my hobby is connecting people, and like
Mhm.
professionally, I've got this recruitment business that we help people connect with team members, and then personally, I've over this last 3 or 4 years connecting people and doing kind of weird and wonderful things to have better conversations and help people get to know each other. That has become a hobby. So I read books on it, I do courses on it, and I put myself in uncomfortable situations to kind of be better at it and help other people. And so it wasn't natural. I'd be very happy going to an event and just chatting to 1 or 2 people for the whole thing. And I'm generally happy. I don't want to go to an event and try and work the room, right, and meet 100 people. Got no interest in that. I want to be having like a deeper conversation with a few people. And I think the thing for me is I really enjoy helping other people have that same experience as well. And it all came from being lonely, right? So I lived in the southwest of England, didn't have any entrepreneurial friends or kind of business owner
Mhm.
friends. It wasn't kind of a hotbed of kind of entrepreneur activity. And when I found, the kind of the community that was my first one where I bought JobRack through, it was like I found my people. And it was like, oh,
Mhm. Mhm.
and not just on business. And this is the big thing for me. It's you go to some business events and it's all business. And I'm
Mhm.
like, yeah, no, that's not really my thing. What I want to be doing is with a group of people where we're chatting about business and then the life that it enables or the life that we want and its growth. And there's maybe some chat about biohacking. And then there's chat about, I don't know, which passports are you aiming to get because you want to have some, like sovereign independence or whatever it might be. And it's that being around those people. And I think I spent a long time without the kind of friends that I'd always dreamt of. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
if you start from a position of, like, I'll be kind of really open, like kind of loneliness in that sense. And then if you end a 10-year relationship, move to a city that you've never lived in, that you don't know many people, in the middle of a pandemic that has everybody locked down, it makes you really, really motivated to meet people and talk to people and
Mhm.
kind of build communities. And so I just jumped in, and then discovered that I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoy it for me, and I really enjoy it for other people. And so a couple of odd little ingredients there, means that I've just found something that I am really good at it, and I'm enjoying getting better at it as well.
Really interesting. So I talk about surrounding yourself with the right people a lot because I think that's a game changer. It certainly changed my life in so many ways. I come from a small village. I was born in a small village with a population of like 2,000 people or something. My neighbors were the average age 65, and they all had farms with like cows and chickens. Right. I didn't know what business is. I didn't know what living in a big city is like. Very very different life, very very different environment that I'm in now, right? In London with like, yeah, completely different life. So a lot that I had to learn, but mostly the way I learned those things was through people, like being around people who have done those kind of things that maybe I was aspiring towards, right? And one thing that I was a member of the student organization, which changed my life completely. There were people who would like travel around the world all the time and organize events and like party all over Europe, and that was a whole new world to me, right? And that's changed my life. And then yeah, I've talked about certain other events that happened to me as well, where I was just surrounded by people who were like inspiring and like-minded, but also a few steps ahead of me. So it made me, just it makes it real, like what's possible, and that had a huge impact on my life, right? And now certainly, I mean, um the communities that we talked about, right? Where you got a bunch of people who are also interesting and inspiring and like-minded, and you just feel like you can have those very open conversations with them because they kind of get it. So highly highly recommended, I think, for everyone who's listening, right? To just work your way towards that somehow, whatever it is for you, whatever you can find those kind of people. I think it's super super impactful. And I have to say, so I think I was quite certainly introverted. I would say I still am I'm kind of an extrovert on demand kind of person. I think I can be very extroverted when I have to be, but I'm perfectly fine just being in my apartment for a few days alone. I'll be very happy. So but I think yeah, all of that can be learned. It feels like it's funny because we're like social creatures, but to a lot of it, it doesn't come so naturally to like be social and to
Mm.
be around people, right?
Yeah, and
um
I think a lot of so I'm an extrovert, right? Very, very clearly, right? A few days in my flat and I'm climbing the walls, right? I need and want to see people. Um, but I think for a lot of people, introverts or extroverts, a lot of the classic social experiences are draining, right?
mm,
And you can go it, and especially in the business world, right? The business networking events are some of the most unfulfilling experiences probably of my life, right? You can be in a room with 100 people, but be seriously lonely, right? And come out from it thinking, and I
mm,
use that word lonely kind of quite intentionally, but not lots of people don't like necessarily resonate with it, but you can come home afterwards and be like, oh, just tired, drained.
mm,
Whereas I went to, so a friend of mine, he runs an amazing business, and I'm going to name drop it. So it's the Surrey toothbrush, right? It's like if Apple made toothbrushes, right? It's the most amazing toothbrush. If you haven't got one, Mattis, you got to get one. They're amazing. It's like 6-week battery life. It's got this clever little magnetic plate that mounts it in your bathroom cupboard. It's next level. Anyway, he did a birthday party for his business, and they had a giant toothbrush shaped cake. And I went to that, and this is only like a year ago, and I didn't know anybody, right? So I saw Mark, had a quick chat with him, and then he introduced me to his dentist, right? Who was a lovely lady. And we spoke for about 3 minutes, and then suddenly we were deep into talking about marriage and relationship. And I don't actually know how it happened, right? I can't think of, did I ask a question? What was it? But we just gelled. I didn't talk to anyone else, and I was there 2 hours, right? And we had this most
mm.
amazing conversation. We ended up walking to the tube station, and it was great. And so for me, the thing that I've discovered is if you are open, and you mentioned it there, right? If you are open, if you're a little bit vulnerable, you turn what can be very, very vanilla kind of conversations into conversations that are really real. And that's what I love about the two communities that we're both in. And I figure it's okay to say them, right, because they've
Yeah.
been so good for us, right? So Dynamite Circle, and the Tropical MBA podcast, and Hampton. Very, very similar in the kind of mindset of people and how people show up and that vulnerability and openness. And willing to talk about the highs of business, but also really willing to talk about the lows, because it is tough, right? And so I'll often ask people, like, one of my favorite questions with entrepreneurs is, how do you feel about your business right now?
Mm-hmm.
And that, like, just that provokes such good conversation. So I think a lot of conventional social interactions can be really, really draining. And I think there's things that you can do to make them fun. So like, one of the things I was taught to do, and I did a little course on this, is, when you next go and order a coffee, right? You're in Starbucks, Pret, wherever you are, right? Wherever your kind of coffee chain of choices, right? When you go up there, like, ask them how they are. And then say whatever your order is, say, I would like the best iced mocha in the world. Like, not just an average iced mocha, not just a mediocre one. I want, like, the best one you can possibly make me. Do you reckon you can do that? Watch them smile, right? Okay, it's just fun. And so I play with this kind of stuff and I love it. And it just changes little interactions, right? These kinds of things, and you can have fun in it. It doesn't need to take a lot of time, but just that sharing of a smile with someone where you wouldn't normally, or it would be very superficial, that's just one of the little things that I'll play with. And that, and then we go a lot more deeper and vulnerable when we're in a, kind of a more closed space with a community. But I think it all starts with openness and vulnerability. And that's what I discovered and then
Mm-hmm.
tried. It's uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable, but I try to make an effort to be open more than not.
Yeah, that's the thing, being uncomfortable. I had a conversation about somebody recently on working hard, and I said, for me, a large part of working hard is actually being uncomfortable, and like doing things that don't feel comfortable, but you feel like they're necessary, or something's going to be better if you do it. And often, if something feels uncomfortable, I just made this mindset shift. Basically, if something feels uncomfortable, then I just need to do it, and it's probably something that I should do. But
Yes.
I'd love to hear if you have any more of those. I love those kind of questions, like what you mentioned now. How do you feel about your business?
Mm.
I organized an event in, was it November, December last year, for a few entrepreneurs, and one thing I did was I gave everyone a card. So I bought these cards that were they're sold by Steven Bartlett. So, he has a
Yep.
podcast,
Diver
and at the
CEO
end of the
cards. Yep.
yeah, Diary of a CEO cards, right? So I felt they're pretty, he has these questions. So every guest who he has on the podcast, in the end, every guest writes down a question for the next guest, right? So it's usually something interesting, deep, might be funny. So
Mm.
I brought those cards, and to every guest, I gave one of those cards and said, look, if you're not sure what to ask first, you want to talk to a new person, pull your card and just ask them this question, right? And see what comes up, and that should hopefully open a conversation for you. So I think that made it a little bit easier, or a little bit more interesting, or at least a little bit
Mm.
different. But I love to collect good questions. I mean, partially because I run these podcasts, so it's part of my job, so to say, to ask good questions. But also, I think if you want to learn something, if you want to get good answers, you need to ask good questions. And that's not necessarily just in conversations. I think that's also in problem solving, in your day-to-day life, right? Like, ask good questions, you'll get good answers. So it was a long question. If you have any
Yeah.
other good questions that you
I
can share.
So I love this stuff. I mean, I'm looking over in the corner. I think I've got like 9 different sets of conversation cards, and on average, 10% of them will be good. I think the Diary of a
Mhm.
CEO sets are very good, actually. Both version 1 and version 2, I'd say 50% of them are like really good
Mm,
questions. And we, with my partner, we have a Google Doc of good questions. So every time we
love
host,
it.
we ask a question, right? So we'll be having
Mhm.
dinner. It might be 4 of us, it might be 12 of us. We'll do a roundtable question. Um, and when we do events, like larger events like the one that we do for the Dynamite Circle in the summer, we got like 115 people on the tables at dinner. We have a conversation menu, and we just invite people. We're like, hey, you might have great chat going, but if you want to do something a little bit different, there's a list of 10 questions. Maybe check them out and have a look. And some people are a bit resistant to them because it feels forced, right? But a lot of the time, people will pick them up and go, "Oh, should we have a look down it?" Oh, and then they'll go, "Oh, that one's quite interesting." And the one from last year that was just everyone raved about is, "What's the most courageous thing you've ever done?" That is a great question, and prompts and so many people. And then what really kind of like just hits the spot for me is, so we heard people had good conversations. Then another guy said to us the week after the event, he'd gone to get his hair cut, right, with his barber. He's been going to the same barber for 25 years. He's never had more than a superficial conversation with him. And he asked him, he said,
Mhm.
"Oh, I was at this event and they had this like conversation when they got this question, like, And his question came up, is it cool if I ask you? And the barber's like, yeah. And he's like, oh, what's the most courageous thing you've ever done? And they then go into this incredible conversation about how this guy made the decision, I think it was as a teenager, to move from Italy to London. And, they just went like 8 levels deeper, despite the fact they've known each other for 25 years. They've seen each other every 2 weeks for 25 years, getting his haircut. And there's a real power in that. So I love it when people then carry it on. So I think we also do with our team. So in our team meetings, every month, we will do a question that's designed to help us get to know each other. And it might be, how do you have fun? It might be, what's the most embarrassing accident you had as a child? What did you want to be when you grew up? Things like that. So, and I think it's really important with your team, because especially when we're remote, we don't get those like serendipitous moments about having a birthday cake or having lunch together, things like that. So you have to actually be more intentional about doing it. And again, I think at some point I will produce a set of these conversation cards like for JobRack to give and to sell to people for their team meetings, because like this isn't in traction, this isn't in scaling up, but team meetings don't need to be all about work, right? And I think it's a great opportunity to get to know your team. We've recently started telling jokes in our team meetings. So just to lighten the scene, everyone has to bring a joke, and we just go around and maybe we do half at the start, half at the end, and everyone tells a joke, and it's just fun. And I think that's really important. So I think the being, as much as it can sometimes feel uncomfortable, like, interrupting your group and saying, hey, like, is it okay if we do a, round of introductions and help people get to know each other? It's always better, right? It's always tempting to be chill. And there's a woman called Priya Parker that wrote a book called The Art of Gathering. And she talks about how to create really, really great events and gatherings. And she's like, don't be chill, right? If you take conscious authority, I think it's not generous authority of like kind of managing the group, as it were, it's so much better. And then just to kind of, because I could talk about this with you for hours, right? And, we'd lose the listeners. But my favorite question from the Diary of a CEO pack, and it was so unexpected who it was from, is the question is, how many times have you truly been in love?
Oh, wow.
And the person that asked it was Piers Morgan. And I was like, well, those two things don't go together in my head. But it's an amazing question for a couple of reasons. One, when you ask it, people will often, what normally happens, and I think I've done this like 3 times so far in a small group, is that then prompts a debate between what does truly in love mean? Can you be truly in love for a weekend, right? Is it intensity or is it time? There is often a gender divide on this one, is what I've observed so far, but it's super interesting. But then obviously it normally leads into people talking about the times that they've been in love, and as that's been a wonderful question. And so like I've had, I don't want to say value from it, but so many great experiences and connections with people just from that one question in that pack. And so I highly encourage people, even if they're not as intentional as you and me, maybe just buy these kind of packs and just flick through them. And then you just almost just like leave them around a little bit.
Just got some ideas. I love that. Man, the barber story that you mentioned reminded me of something. So my friend, he's good at conversations and good at asking questions. And he was in an Uber. He was in Miami, and he was in an Uber. And I'll be honest, when I'm in an Uber or a taxi, I'm usually just quiet, right? I'll take out my phone. I have a book to read. I have a podcast to listen to. I have Twitter to check, like whatever, right? I'll get stuff to do, right?
Yeah, me
But
too.
he's the same, right? But he had a conversation with, he said, I looked at the driver and he looked interesting. So I decided to have a conversation with him. And he found out this whole story, how the driver was in prison for like 10 years or something. And when he got into prison, I forgot the whole story. And even if I remember, I probably shouldn't go into the whole thing. But he then murdered somebody in prison. So he had to stay in the prison for a longer time even. And my friend was there at the back seat. And I was like, dude, weren't you like scared? Like, isn't that like a bit of a freaky conversation to have when you're at the back seat of an Uber and you got nowhere to go? And, there's this guy in the front driving you and just talking about how he like killed a few people back in the days. And he was like, yeah, I was like, but it was interesting. I was like a little bit scared, but I was also a little bit fascinated. And then they took a selfie in the end. He sent me the selfie with the driver. I was like, dude, That's I need to talk to my Uber drivers more often.
Yeah.
That's just
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah. I'm the same as you. I'm almost always just doing what I'm doing. But so often, actually, there is an interesting reason why they're doing it. And the last really good one I had was I was in New Orleans last year, and I was just leaving. I was going to the airport, and there was no way he was letting me not have a conversation. Right? He was
Yeah,
there to
yeah,
chat. Right?
yeah,
And that
yeah.
was, and I think he would have done the ride for free as long as I chatted to him. And it was great. And one of the biggest things that came out of it was the fact I'd been pronouncing New Orleans all wrong. Right? And he taught me. He's like, no, it's not New Orleans. It's New Orleans. I'm like, okay, got it. And it was great. And he was just had such energy and character. And some of it, you've kind of got to be in the right frame of mind for this, right? Like,
Yeah,
if you're
yeah.
really, really tired, it's very tempting to not to do this because you're like, I'm tired, I've got work to do, whatever. But actually, sometimes having a good conversation and building a connection can actually be really energizing, right? And so, but I'm, even with how much I enjoy this, I don't always do it either. I'm maybe 50-50, like the interactions that
Uh-huh.
I'll have. But I do like having some fun stuff. So, like, if I can find a way to high five the barista in Starbucks, and after I've asked them for the world's best iced mocha, I love that. And I love it because of they always smile. It always gets a great smile.
Yeah, yeah.
Two, high fiving's fun. And three, because I know, and I don't look around, but I know that everybody that sees that has smiled and has thought, what's that
Mm,
weirdo doing? But they've
mm,
smiled.
mm,
And I'm
mm.
like, I like that. I just want to pass it on one little bit of like smile at a time. I think it's just fun, right? It's, yeah. Entrepreneurship is hard times at times. So we may as well have some fun where we can.
Spreading that positive energy around the world. Nice. I'm really looking forward to. So I'll be at a few of the events that you're organizing, right? There's the dinner, which is end of April, I think, and
Yeah,
then
we've got one on 1st of May, one a couple of
first
weeks
of May,
later,
yeah.
and there's going to be lots more.
Then
This is what I
the
love.
Dynamite Circle event in the summer. So I mean, I'm excited to having all these conversations. I'm curious also. So you know, you organize a bunch of events. You seem to be going to all sorts of events and meeting all these people. What else are we're in London. What else are interesting things to do in London?
So for
Or
me, one
not
of my
necessarily
favorite,
just in London. Okay,
yeah,
let's say, I mean, I think a lot of the listeners are from here, from the UK, so they might be interested in that, but not necessarily just in London.
yeah, I mean, unsurprisingly, my thing is about like being with people. And so I love just going for a walk. I love walking
Hmm.
around, ideally a long walk, like with someone. So whenever anyone is coming to London from outside of the UK, and they want to meet up, I'll be like, hey, do you fancy grabbing a takeaway coffee and let's go for a walk? And
Hmm.
there is, and one, because I think it's fun. A, I like getting my steps in each day, right? B, I like kind of just helping people to see maybe some unusual aspects of London and areas of London as well. But also there is something that I've since learned. I was doing this already, and then recently I read about this, and there is something about when you go for a walk with someone, because you're not sat across a coffee table or on even on camera like we are now, right? You're not looking at each other, so actually it helps the conversation sometimes.
Hmm.
And you
Hmm.
can still look across at each other, things like that. So we'll normally go for a walk. So I'm a big fan of that. If you want something particularly fun that's London specific to do, is I'm sure they've got it in other cities. It's these text message treasure hunts. So there's one called In the
Aha.
Hidden
Yeah.
City. And again, you get to see bits of the city that you normally wouldn't do. You text your answers. It gives you a clue. You have to figure it out. So that's a lot of fun. And for me, dinner, right? Dinner with a group of people in ideally a quiet space. Restaurants are just so noisy. So I love having people over for dinner at mine. I've
Mm-hmm.
got like this folding table. I've only got a small
You got
apartment.
beautiful view.
Yeah, I've got a beautiful view. I'm up high, which is unusual for London. I'd love my view, but I can seat 12 for dinner, right? And we'll have one
Uh-huh.
conversation,
Hmm.
question around the table. That's my favorite thing to do.
Nice. Yeah, I could imagine. I could imagine. You seem like that kind of person, and yeah, you get a perfect view for dinner
It's good.
place. So I've seen that, and yeah, so that's how Noel and I kind of no, we didn't meet like that, but that was one of the things that we had a conversation about when I saw our view, and I was like, oh my god, that's beautiful. Um, what was I gonna say? Well, a a few quick questions for the end. Any favorite book or event, or it could be person or course or something that had the biggest impact on your business, especially, but it could be also life in general.
Yeah, there's a book called The Power of Moments, and it is an amazing book. And I'm just going to try and check. Yeah, by Chip Heath and Dan Heath. And it is all about how we have the ability to create really great experiences for people like in our businesses. And whether that's, and in day-to-day life as well. And so many experiences that you have with businesses are just a bit meh, right? You
Mm,
sign up, maybe you spend a lot of money for something and it comes in like shit packaging, right? Or you sign up for a service with an agency and then they give you this massive onboarding questionnaire and you're just like, oh my God, this is the first thing I've had. And this book, The Power of Moments, it's a really interesting read, and it just cemented for me the massive opportunity that we have. And we do a lot of things in this space, and I want to do more and more and more. I want people to have just great moments when they're working with us. And there's a little anecdote in there about how when people go to like Disneyland or a theme park, if you ask them every half hour to rate out of 10 how much they're enjoying the day, the average over the day is 5, right?
mm,
Because there's loads of queues, it's expensive, the food's crazy pricey, all these kind of things, right? But if you ask them like 2 weeks later, right, they
mm,
remember
mhm,
two things, right? They'll rate it as like an 8 or a 9, and it's because they remember the peak and they remember the last thing, right? So they remember the
mhm,
best ride that they went on, Space Mountain, let's say, and then they remember the bit at the end where the kids had the Mickey Mouse ears on and they looked super cute, right? And that's why they have the gift shops at the end and all these kind of things. And so we all have the ability to create moments like in our lives, and in our businesses particularly. And God, man, the bar is so low in business, right? Like if you think about the
mhm,
things you've bought recently or the businesses you've interacted with, if you can think about a genuinely good experience, like a 6 or 7 out of 10, I think you're doing well, right? If you can think of a 9 out of 10, I think that's exceptional. And it's a bit like the team culture stuff. This isn't about doing big, grand things. This might just be about you sending a Loom video to a client, just be like, hey, thanks so much for signing up. I'm really looking forward to working with you. Right. Or,
yeah, yeah.
e-commerce space. Just there's things you can do that are just personal. A company that I used to buy batteries from, like, I don't know, I'd order from them maybe every 6 months, right? They would include the tiniest little bag of sweets in every order, right? Brilliant. Like I told loads of people about that company, right? Because it was this tiny little moment that they'd created. So yeah, The Power of Moments by Chip Heath and Dan Heath. Highly recommend that book.
Nice. Never heard of it before, but I love the idea of it. So thank you for that recommendation. You also reminded me. So one book, because we talked a lot about building relationships and dinner events and that kind of stuff. So one book that changed my life, well, one of the first books that I've read that really had a big impact on my life, on my adult life, was Never Eat Alone, which
Yeah.
I feel like you're kind of the embodiment of that book. you, you could write the next version of that book, I feel like. But for somebody like myself, who was not so natural at that, um, the Never Eat Alone is kind of like what it says about, right, how you should, the impact that people have in your life, basically the impact that people around you can have in your life, and how do you surround yourself with just different people more often and build those relationships. So it was written by someone who's also, I would say, naturally really good at building relationships, but it gives you all sorts of, not just the why that's important, but also the how do you actually do that, right? What's steps, or a lot of different tactics that you can use to start building relationships in your life. And if you do just 10% of that, I think you'll be winning. So that's a really good one for everyone who wants to kind of dive deeper into all the things that we talked about today. um Good. Well, I loved this conversation. I've learned a lot. You gave me a lot of things to think about as well. Obviously, we're going to link to your social media. Noel's on a mission now to become more active on LinkedIn as well, I believe. So we're going to see a lot more of you online. Is that right?
Yep, that's definitely right. I have a marketing hat that I'm finally putting on and wearing, and so yeah, doing a lot more in that space. And yeah, if anyone wants to connect and get in touch, then connect with me on LinkedIn. And I think Mattis, we were chatting about the dinners, so I run co-host a monthly dinner in London for UK entrepreneurs. So if anyone wants to come along to that, then just ping me a message on LinkedIn, and we'll connect from there.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, and we'll speak soon.
Sounds good, man. Thanks, Mattis.